Today it's my privilege to introduce Jack Stoltzfus to you. And I really just found out about him through a very different route. Several years ago, one of my daughter's friends asked her who she should see or who she should take her child to, who was 20-something, living in the basement, of course, not working, not contributing, and floundering greatly with what he was going to do. So she said, "Mother, now who would you recommend?" I had no clue. I didn't know you couldn't get kids out of the house. When I was in school and when I took my training, the cry was, "They've left and they're only 14 years old." So it was a new phenomenon, and I really literally had to go search for a therapist that would be, quote, an expert on how to get your kid to do something, and mainly get out of the house. And through my search, I found Jack, and he's a graduate from, I'm going to let him tell you about himself. He's originally from Philadelphia, has a PhD from University of Wisconsin, but he's also been a theologian, working in a church. He's worn many, many hats, and his take on how to do this is very, very fascinating. So with that, please welcome Jack.
Thank you. Well, thanks very much. Yeah, I did spend some time at the University of Wisconsin. I was in seminary for a period of time at Luther Seminary in St. Paul, and kind of wound my way in the direction of helping kids, adolescents for the most part, ran a treatment center for adolescents. And you know, as I got older, then I started to work with parents. As I became a parent of an adolescent, now I'm a parent of young adults. So I moved into that direction and began to realize that there's quite a need out there with parents of young adults who are struggling with how do I launch this young adult son or daughter. So I've actually branded myself America's launch coach. So I don't launch boats or coach launching boats. And not too long ago, I didn't catch a misspelling in a blog I wrote, and I called myself America's lunch coach. So I don't coach lunch either, okay? But let me start out by giving you a story that I think is important found in a foundational way here. So back when I worked at Wilder Child Guidance Clinic in St. Paul, I had a colleague of mine share a story that took place in a therapy session. She was meeting with this kind of burly, big kind of, I think a truck driver, father and a son, and he was not real happy about being there because it was court-ordered family therapy. The son was delinquent and had problems with drugs, and he's kind of glaring at the son, and the son looks up at him and says, "Dad, would you cry if something happened to me?" And his father, without hesitation, said, "There are not enough buckets in the world to hold the tears I'd cry for you if I lost you." It's still a little emotional for me to hear that, but there are not enough buckets in the world to hold the tears that I would cry if I lost you. What a wonderful message, isn't it? Isn't that? Hopefully we heard that in growing up. And our kids need to hear that no matter what age they are, but particularly young adults, because it's important to create a sense of security for young adults that when they leave, they know no matter what, they have this unconditional love from a mother or a father that's there for them. So in their darkest moments, yeah, they know, okay, somebody does care about me, I do matter. So it's a really foundational message, and I'll talk a little bit more about how important that is. Let me share another story, and it's probably why it's a little emotional to me talking about a father-son relationship. when I was growing up, I ended up in a kind of a distant relationship with my father. He wasn't one that was kind of neglectful, and he didn't have problems like drinking or gambling or being unfaithful to my mom, but he just was remote and not expressive and kind of critical of me in my adolescent period. And I went back home once. I was here in Minneapolis. I was going to graduate school. I think I might have been at Luther at the time. So I was somewhat looking like this. This is not me. But long hair, had a beard. All I could grow was a little bit of a chin strap beard. But anyway, I went back home. And at the time, my parents were living in Jersey. And my father wouldn't talk to me. Yeah. And I have to ask my mother, Mom, could you have Dad pass the butter down to me? And I started to realize my father, a couple generations back, comes from an Amish tradition. And you know what happens if you offend the norms of the Amish community, you shun him. So I have a feeling that that's what was going on with my dad. Anyway, it added to my insecurity about how my dad really felt about me. And I thought, my gosh, if I go to prison sometime or something, well, he would cut me off completely. He'd never want to talk to me again. So the good news is that I worked through some of these issues that I had with my dad, and we had this reconciliation before he died. He died at quite a young age, unexpectedly, but it was just so good to have that reconciliation take place. It also ended up leading me to a dissertation to try to define and measure healthy separation of adolescents from young adults. And I was running a drug treatment center in Madison, Wisconsin, and I compared a delinquent drug abusing group of adolescents to a control group of adolescents who had no delinquency or drug issues. And what I found was that this group of normal adolescents had a high degree of love or connection to their parents, and also felt like they had a high degree of autonomy. And the parents, on the other hand, showed a high degree of love and a high degree of allowance for autonomy and development of one's own identity. So it was clear to me that emotional separation required this kind of process where parents show love, but also let go. Show love and support and let go of the young adult. So that was an important finding that then has contributed to the work that I'm doing now with parents. So fast forward to the sandwich. So now it's the mid-90s. Now I'm a father of young adults. Now I'm on the other side. I was the young adult adolescent, now I'm the father. And I have a daughter who's kind of difficult and contentious, and at one point we said, is there something wrong with you? Are you having problems? Yeah, nothing wrong with me, it's you people that are the problem, basically. So she ends up going to college, not far away, about 5 or 6 miles away or something like that. And about a month into her time over there, she calls me and she said, Dad, I'm really upset. I didn't get to the dining room in time. And they closed the dining room and I didn't get anything to eat. Can you bring a sandwich over to me? After I got off the floor, convulsively laughing, she said, well, I guess you're not going to bring the sandwich, right here. Not in this lifetime, I'm not. And then I hung up and I started thinking, how did she get into this kind of way of thinking, which is kind of like I'm entitled to have my dad come bring a sandwich over to me? And I thought, it must be me. I must be doing something. I mean, we talk about this young adult population being so entitled. Well, who entitled them? I mean, it's us, right? As parents, we've overinvested in them and taken care of and done more things for them than we should have done. In fact, there's a survey of adults, and the general sentiment was that parents do too much for kids. Would you all agree with that? That this generation is doing too much for kids? Many of you, and I'm in this generation, boomers and silent generation, you know, we didn't do a lot for our kids in some ways, you know. Back, at least in my growing up days, my parents didn't do a lot for me. All right, so here's the problem. 52% of young adults, 18 to 29, are living with one or both parents. Does that surprise you, that figure? It's 27 million young adults.
It's shocking.
Yeah. That's higher than post-World War II, when it was like 47%. We had men and women coming back from the service living with their parents for a while because they couldn't afford to live any other place. So it's a huge issue. It's a very challenging issue. And young adults today are taking 5 to 10 years longer to reach adulthood. And that's kind of hard for boomer parents and silent generation parents to think, well, what's going on here, you know? I didn't take that long. You know, when I turned 18 and then went to college and I was 21, I never thought about moving back home. And I guarantee you, my parents never thought about me moving back home either. That was not at all in their mind, you know. But it's a huge problem, and it's not getting a lot better right now. So during the pandemic, 32% of young adults in college went back home. And some of those young adults haven't left. They're still there. They didn't do well in school. They didn't do well in virtual, virtual classroom setting type of thing. They lost their confidence. Now they don't want to go back to school, or they're afraid to go out to work. I had one young adult said, too anxious to go out and apply for a job because I might get rejected. You know, so it's a big problem. This connects to the Wi-Fi. It's just a little funny story, but I'm going to skip over this one. I'm going to skip that one too, and let's go to this one. So let's talk about the young adults, because they're different right now. One of the arguments that I make with parents is you've got to understand this is a different generation. This is not your generation that you grew up with. So they like free time, and you've heard of work-life balance. They like work-life balance. I had one guy tell me, he said, yeah, I heard this woman, a young woman, and she came to work, and a week after she was at work, she went to her boss and said, say, by the way, on Tuesdays, I'm going to be gone from 1 to 2:30 for my yoga class. But I'll be back. I'm going to stay longer than at the end of the day. Can you imagine going to your employer and saying that 20, 30, 40 years ago? Are you kidding me? We said, that's not uncommon. I want my work-life balance. If you're not flexible enough, I'll move to a different job. Young adults change jobs 7 times in the 20s. You know, and they don't settle into a career until quite later. They want to work at creative jobs. Self-expression is really important. They're in the media, social media a lot. They travel more. The millennials are the first generation where work ethic is not in the top 5 values. Every generation before that, work ethic was up there. So we're dealing with a different challenge with young adults today. They take longer to find a career. They're digital natives. They operate in that world. My son just is wired differently than me. He gave me his phone at one point. It was I can't remember the model, but anyway, he gave it to me, and he said, well, where's the manual? He said, oh, I didn't use a manual. You can Google if you want a manual. So I Googled it. It was 140 pages. I said, I'm not going to do that. But he just picked it up, figured it all out. He didn't have to go to the manual. So that's a difference. So anytime he's down visiting me, he's in Duluth right now, I usually have some electronics thing or digital thing to, hey, can you fix this? And they're the least overtly religious. About 40% are nuns. Do you know what NONES, do you know what that means? Non-denominational. They don't identify with any particular denomination. Nationally, it's about 27% of all adults, but for young adults, it's 40%. So you get an idea that this is a different group. I mean, this is your grandfather's Buick or whatever you want to call it. So it's good news. Here's some things that I really want to remind you of, because we can get kind of negative about, they're the participation trophy group, they're the entitled blah, blah, blah type of thing. And I think it's important to keep a balance and understanding there's some really good things about this generation. They like to stay close to the parents, sometimes too close. You'd like them to move a little out of the house maybe, but they don't move around as much. Most of the kids that I'm interviewing, I call them kids, 18 to 29, are not wanting to, you know, buy a van and go to Big Sur or go to California. When I ask them, where do you want to be living 5 years? They say, well, yeah, in the Twin Cities probably. So they want to stay closer to home. The relationship improves over time with parents. Now I think that's been traditionally true. I kind of tell the parents, once they move out and they're independent, the relationship will change. It'll be better. So from both sides. They feel responsible for family members. This is interesting. Over 60%, I can't remember exactly the figure, but 60, 70% said they feel like it is their responsibility to take care of their aging parent when that time comes. 60%. That's good news. They're going to take care of us. You know, what's the boomer population percentage that believe it's their responsibility to take care of their parents? 25%.
Wow.
So look at the change in that. They desire to have a positive social impact. You know, they want to help people. They want to do things, good things for people, to make a difference. They marry later in life. Right now, the first age of males for marriage is 30 years old, and for females is 29. 50 years ago it was 23 and 21. Again, to me, that's a good thing, isn't it? We've learned more about brain development takes place all the way to the age of 25. So, you know, getting your identity together, figuring out who you are, what you're doing, where you're going, is hugely important. It's really a good thing that they're waiting to get married later on. You know, I think that, and the divorce rate's starting to tail off at this point too. So, and then, you know, another good news is everybody that I've interviewed, and I interview the parents and I interview the young adult, none of the young adults that I've interviewed, when I ask them, where do you want to be living 5 years from now? None of them have said, I just want to be living with mommy and daddy. They don't want to be living at home. Now the parents, when they hear that, there's a great sigh of relief. You know, how long is this kid going to be living here? So, but so really some good news about this population too. So, did I miss a slide there? Yeah, I thought I'd talk a little bit about Gen Zs, because 18 to 29 right now is, you're going to get the youngest millennials. They're about 27, 28, 29, 30 years old. But most of this 18 to 29 are Gen Zs, okay? And Gen Zs, some things about them, smartphones, consume less TV. They're more concerned about security because they experienced the recession. They went through that period, and maybe they saw their parents being anxious about the economy, or maybe one of the parents lost a job. So they're a little more concerned about security. They're competitive, independent, and entrepreneurial, good at multitasking, true digital natives. They never do anything other than the digital world. My son, born in 1980, started using a computer for class in the 90s, early 90s. And from that point on, his writing became totally illegible. I saw a thank you note and I thought it was a third grader that wrote this thing. But he doesn't operate it in writing. It's all digital. It's all computer-based stuff. Now, this is the last thing that's important, though, too. This is a group that has a higher rate of anxiety and depression. And one of the things that's happened with the pandemic that rose to a higher level, one of the kind of bad news things is that it is not tailed off after the pandemic. The level of anxiety and depression with this group is still extremely high. Suicide is the second leading cause of death for this population. This is a population where you're going to see a lot of opioid deaths, fentanyl deaths. So they're a population that in some ways is really at risk as well. So, okay, how are we doing? So let me talk. So I say, okay, I'm the launch coach. Well, what does that mean? I got to keep this mic up here. Yes. What does a launched young adult look like? Well, that would be a young adult who is accepting adult responsibilities. Got a job, maybe taking care of their housing, have a career, maybe they've started a relationship with a significant other. These are adult responsibilities, and they're financially independent. Yeah. Now, I add that little twist, and they have a positive relationship to their parents, a positive connection to the parents. Now, that's not always possible. You know, in some situations where the parents are really abusive or toxic or whatever, it just can't happen. But even there, I'd say they're not well launched, at least, in terms of, you know, being in a healthy relationship with the parents. So why is it harder for parents to let go these days? Can I get some ideas from you? Why do you think this, pretty much the boomer, Gen X, Gen X generations are having a harder time letting go? What do you think that's about? Yes?
I just think we're so much more involved in their lives, in every aspect.
More involved in their lives.
Every aspect.
Every aspect.
Every party, everybody gets
Yeah.
party bags. It's
Yeah.
the moms plan everything.
Yeah.
Even in high school.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's where the helicopter parent kind of concept came from. Yeah, it's really, I think it started with my generation, the boomer generation, where we became much more invested in the success of our young adults, of our children, and much more invested in their happiness. And so then you saw a lot of efforts to kind of do things for them in their growing up years, and then if they're struggling in the young adult years, there's more effort to kind of hang on and try to help more in those situations. Yes?
My husband, throughout our married life, kept saying to our kids, you guys are just passing through. It drove me crazy. It made me so upset. But he was right. And they're both good citizens, making money and married. And
Yeah, they passed through well then.
They did.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think you have to think that way. Our kids are gifts that we have for a while. We're renting them, we're not owning them, so. But 60% of mothers have contact daily with their young adult children. It's either texting or phone calls or whatever. My wife talks with my daughter, my youngest daughter, probably 5 to 10 times a day. Wow. I mean, it's unbelievable. And they have a good relationship, but her husband and I kind of go, oh, come on, you know. But they're just everything back and forth. 80% of parents would take their young adult son or daughter back anytime, back home, you know, for any reason. Over 60% are funding their young adult in some way, have financially involved with them. So those are things that describe the kind of parenting that's going on at this stage. Yes?
I wonder if any of it is related to the financial hardships that are prevalent, high rent.
Oh, absolutely.
Inflation. And so it's not that the adult wants to be home, but they're stuck.
Absolutely, yeah. This is not it's not one party's guilty and the other isn't. There are circumstances, clearly college debt at this point, the cost of housing, those are huge issues that make it very hard for somebody to leave. If they have a job at McDonald's or something, you're not going to be able to survive on that and pay your rent and an apartment. So you're absolutely right. So what practices do parents need to strengthen to launch a young adult? So here's where I put a model together, comprehensive model to say these are practices that we as parents need to strengthen to be able to help launch a young adult. So, and I have this kind of wheel illustration here. So on the left here is the parents' practices that need to be strengthened. We talked about unconditional love, that's really important. The other is this idea of building a relationship with your young adult, understanding their different world. That's really important. So I talk about getting closer to your young adult, but not in a controlling manner, but closer in expressing love and letting go, supporting their autonomy. That's the kind of emphasis I think that's really important. So I call these two foundational, unconditional love and relating. The next two are what I call healing practices, and this is where parents feel like they did something wrong. They feel guilty, or they feel, it's my fault. They're not leaving, or they're struggling, or whatever. Parents, my wife was one who's commented that said, being a parent is an inherent guilt trip. You can always find something, I should have done this, or I could have done better at this, or whatever. So I think I think of apology as basically the antidote for guilt. If we feel guilty about something, apologize. It's really it can be a very powerful communication between a parent and a young adult to say, I am sorry for, I wasn't there for you for this, or I treated you more harshly than I should have, or whatever. And it releases the parent and the guilt from the guilt sense, and it also reduces the extent to which the young adult continues to hold you responsible for, I can't do this because you didn't do this or you didn't do that for me. So apology is the antidote for guilt. Now the second healing practice is the practice of forgiveness. And beyond taking responsibility for something that we did and apologizing for it, we need to forgive ourselves as parents too. Yeah, I could have done better, but I can't do a do-over. So all I can do is just apologize and forgive myself. But sometimes we have to forgive our kids too. I mean, they've been really difficult. They got in a lot of trouble. There's drug or alcohol issues, and parents have to forgive their kids too, so they don't carry on resentment that keeps them angry and attached in a negative way to their young adult son or daughter. The next two practices are what I call the launch practices. And the one about showing backbone is really critical, because you've got to be able as parents to be loving, but also to learn to say no. Learn to have boundaries, learn to have limits, learn to have expectations and consequences. And because the young adult needs to feel some firmness there. If it's this kind of mushy situation where I can do anything I want, my parents don't care, they don't express any kind of concern about it, they're not going to be moving out into being more responsible adults. So where do you think parents have the most trouble? Well, the last one I should say is letting go, and that's grieving. That's being able to say goodbye, and it's hard for some parents, 60% of parents like to have the kids at home, they enjoy them, and so there's some tears at times like that, but it's necessary. But where do you think parents have trouble? Backbone. Yeah, it's balancing that, figuring out how I can be nurturing and firm, how I can have love and backbone. So what am I talking about in terms of backbone?
Being true to your word, modeling values, persistent, deciding and acting on what is right, not what's going to make the young adult happy or me feel less guilty. Honesty, tell the truth, lead in, face reality. Love with guidelines and consequences. So these are things that are really important for parents to strengthen. Mistakes parents make, in general, I think that they are over control or under control. Either of those create kind of problems for young adults. You can read some of those. I think, I would say most of the parents that I work with will admit that they feel like they are enablers at times. Are you familiar with that word? It's used kind of in a negative context to say that you spare the young adult the consequence of their behavior. Yeah. The young adult doesn't go to work one day, didn't feel like it, or doesn't go to school. The parent calls and says, well, he's sick today, he can't come in or something. So interceding in a way that the person doesn't experience a consequence of their behavior. So value of setting limits, opportunities for learning, how do they learn unless they fail and make mistakes and learn from those mistakes? And if we jump in and take over, it's not going to be helpful to them. Opportunities for hardening. I think it's like one comment about the way in which we've entitled our young adults and the young adults of today is they lack a certain amount of grit, a certain amount of stamina, And I think it's true because we've intervened, we've softened the experience of our young adults in ways that now have created more problems for them. Challenging the young adult to step up. I mean, by setting limits, you force them to step up, You can't use the car this week. Well, how am I going to get to work? Well, you might have to walk or bicycle, I guess. I don't know. But, tapping into their reserve, I think a lot of parents I see don't see the capability within the young adult to really step up and be on their own and capable. I had a young man with Asperger's and an ADHD, and the parents, and he had his permit, but the parents were trying to teach him to drive. And they get in the car, and they would say, I would tell them, I say, you gotta let him drive, you gotta have him drive. And they said, well, we tried to. We say, would you like to drive? And he said, no, because he knows how anxious they are, Their anxiety is affecting him. So they actually found a person at church that helped him learn to drive, and he passed the test on the first time through with his driver's license. So this anxiety can contribute to these problems. It sends a message you can do it. We need to be able to kind of communicate a belief in our kids that they have this capacity. Sends a message of hope for the future, and saying no may be the most empowering thing you can do. So, so people say, well, how do you know how to balance nurturance and firmness or love and backbone? So there's hundreds of situations that come up, and this is the best kind of advice I can give to parents. Ask yourself these questions. Is my decision or action driven by love, or is it driven by guilt, resentment, frustration, one of those types of emotions? Is my decision or action inconsistent with my principles? We talked about integrity and the principles. And finally, is the decision I make or the action I'm going to take likely to increase independence or cause more dependence? And it's kind of a compass, but it's one of the things I can give parents to say, here's how you can make those tough decisions around balancing love and backbone. So last practice that we need to strengthen is the letting go, because we can't control our young adult. I mean, I talk to parents right away at the beginning. There's things you need to know. You can't control your young adult. You can't fix your young adult, and you're not responsible for them. So if you keep thinking along those lines, you're going to it's going to be a tough time for you. It's what I call self-inflicted wounding, because you keep believing that you can control them and get them to do something you want them to do. So we must do this because it's part of their development. The development of identity, independence, and intimacy is what they need to be doing. We'll continue to suffer unnecessarily unless we let go. And both of us, parents and young adults, have to manage the letting go dance. And I get parents say, well, I'd like to let go, but they're hanging on like a toddler hanging on to my leg or something. And that's true. Sometimes the young adult's hanging on. And sometimes the parents say, well, I move in to try to be more supportive, they push me away. And then when I step back and try to be less involved, then they complain that I don't care about them. I'm not, involved in understanding. So it's a hard dance. There aren't easy answers to the dance. And it's a loving act. We have to think about letting go as a way of expressing love. It's not decreasing that love. It's a way of expressing love. So here's the books that I have. These are practice books related to these 6 practices. They're all available on Amazon. The website, Parents Letting Go, that's pretty easy to remember, Parents Letting Go. That's where my focus tends to be. About a third of my caseload is with the young adults. And then, there's things on that site, blogs, resources, bibliography, quizzes, tip sheets, the short books, and then I do family therapy. I do launch work with parents, helping them launch their young adults. And it's been good for me to be doing this virtually because I can see people across the state. I have some clients in International Falls, Rochester. They're not going to come to my office if I didn't have this virtual therapy practice. So the last thing is just, this is a QR code just to take you right to my website if any of you wanted to snap a picture on that. But otherwise, you could just do parentslettinggo.com. So I guess we have some time for questions. I hope that I saved a little bit of time for that. I have, if you'd like a copy, I have a copy of this Parenting Our Young Adults with Love and Backbone. That's the one that I give to all the clients I work with, have them purchase this. I have it in the car. I'll give you a copy of it at lunch if you'd like to have a copy of that. Maybe for your son or daughter who might be struggling with this, or if you have friends or whatever, feel free to take a copy of that. I'd like to get my story out a little bit more, so if any of you have any contacts with local media and could put in a recommendation for me to be able to be interviewed or talk about my work online in a media context, that would be appreciated as well. So with that, questions, and look, you all are, I always believe in the wisdom of the community. So you know more than I do. If we put all our thoughts together, we'd have a really good understanding of what needs to happen with this particular age group and parents. So I'm looking for comments or questions or whatever. Yes?
Comment and a question.
Okay.
Very interesting information. And it doesn't affect me right now because I've launched my kids. They're all 39, 44 in that age group. But I was amused, when you talk about the boomers. As a boomer, we were drop kicked out of the nest. 18 and boom!
Absolutely.
It was out the door and that was it, and no looking back.
Right.
And my kids they always knew that the world is their oyster. They could go forth and go anywhere and explore. They all came back, which was really strange. So they all live in the Twin Cities, which is, a real blessing for
Close
me.
to the family, that's where
Yeah, they came back. Now their kids are like 6 to 9 age group.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing that this younger generation of my grandkids, that the parents are doing so much more, and I think that some of this has to do with COVID, and you know that they had to turn inward completely into this insular kind of world. But you know, can you make any comments? Have you seen that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think most of us, I think it's fair to say, grew up in the era of children are to be seen and not heard,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
Now the message is children come first.
Yes.
First before the marriage. A lot of marriages struggle because everything is focused on the children. And I think us boomers, for those of us who are in the boomer category, I think are the ones that have contributed the most, started this practice. You know, I mean, I grew up with, here's a baseball, get lost, come back at the end of the day. With my kids, we got them into activities. They were running to baseball, running to swimming, running to things like that. And now I have 10 grandchildren. I could go every night to an event that they're in. It's swimming, it's soccer, you know, they got skiing, they got basketball. I mean, it's just unbelievable the amount of structured activity and the cost to parents, what parents are paying for this. You know, it's just unbelievable. $1,600 to go to a soccer camp or something like that. I mean, well, if you don't, you're not going to be able to compete, you know. You won't be an Olympian.
Yeah.
Like everybody's going to be an Olympian. So,
How do you get them to lighten up?
I don't know.
You're the coach. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you get them to lighten up their schedules so they can just grow up?
Yeah, you know, and it's disconcerting. It's disturbing. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think they miss a lot of creative opportunity. Go out in the woods and build a fort, or do, you know, just make up some games or something like that. On the other hand, I see kids who are not involved in a lot of activities, and they're on Xbox. They're just
Yes.
constantly on that. I don't think that's good either. So there's some balance on this, though. That's really true. It can't be all or nothing, and I'm afraid I see a lot of all.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, here's my contribution. I was a principal of a middle school and high
Yeah.
school. And what I saw is the parents who kept their children involved were trying to keep their kids busy and active in organized activities to keep them away from the influx of drugs and social
Right.
media. So to me, it was a positive thing. And most of those children learned the discipline and all of that through those activities and ended up being contributing adult citizens.
Yes.
So I don't see it as negatively maybe as
No.
maybe others do. You want your kids to be active and they have a lot of energy, and that's.
Yeah, I
that's
agree.
what
If you're going to err on the side of put them in a lot of activities, I really agree with that. So somebody else, yes.
I have a question. You said you did family therapy, and I'm wondering what happens in families when one doesn't launch and the other one is launched in a seemingly a normal way.
Okay.
What about those relationships between the siblings?
Okay, so the question is about when one launches and then the other one doesn't. Well, this is a common experience that I have. A lot of times it's, not necessarily, but a lot of times it's the older sibling is gone and has been through school and is now living on their own mark, you know, they have marketed trade and everything like that. But there's one that's not launching, sticking at home for whatever reason. And I don't know, I can't tell you that there's a common explanation or reason for that. But sometimes you try to get the sibling involved in kind of supporting that younger person. You know, maybe helping them get a job or something like that. But it's a fairly common thing that there's, if you have 2 or 3 children, some of them are launching well and one of them isn't launching very well. So, yes, we'll go over there.
I am a parent of these people. I have 3
Can't hear.
I'm gonna,
I am a parent of, I'll put my teacher voice on, sorry.
Okay.
I am a parent of 3 of these people. I have 2 25-year-olds and a 21-year-old, and 2 boys and a girl. And my question is kind of related to what you just asked. What do you see with the difference in gender? I'm reading right now, the Surgeon General has put out some good information about boys. There's an author out there right now that's talking about isolation and kind of unsuccessful boys. And so that's what we're seeing at our house is we have an oldest, but a female that has launched and is soaring, and the brothers are struggling to get through college. But in ADHD, depression, we have a lot of things at play. So and I don't think I used to think it was really, really like, it's happening to us, but once as a family we got brave enough to talk about it out loud, everyone in this room has something like that going on in their family. And I think there is, to me, there's something about boys, but I'm curious as a professional.
oh yeah, I mean, the good news is that girls are doing better, okay? The bad news is that boys are doing worse. There's a book called Boys and Men by Reeves that describes what's happening with boys, and it's really scary. I mean, right now, 60% of college and people entering college are women, whereas the boys are like 40%. Years ago, it was just reversed. I mean, back in the 70s, 80s, it was 60-40, the other direction. Girls are doing better, boys are not doing very well.
Especially white boys. Especially white boys.
Yeah. It's scary. White boys are doing, I mean, I think, I don't know about the racial differences, but white males have done better, and they are in a particular class that's doing worse right now. Now, Reeves has a very interesting suggestion about how to address this. It doesn't help with the young adults at this point, but what he argues is to redshirt boys in starting school a year later than girls, because they develop a year later than girls. So they're behind from kindergarten on, and I've encouraged my kids with their kids to hold them back if you can, because if they're really advanced and ready, that's different. But that's one kind of solution to it. But it's a problem, because now you're getting the young women who are getting college degrees and have careers, and they're looking at these men who dropped out of college. There's a high dropout rate for college for males. Why would they be interested in that male? So it's a big problem. Yes.
I know this is ancient history, but way back when, first of all, I think they letting go of stopping selective service was a terrible mistake. It doesn't mean that everybody has to go into Army, Navy, taking Peace Corps, etc. Because my observation, I think it was done quite universal. These young men coming into the service, you either came out a heck of a lot better, or a few of them came out worse.
Yeah.
But the majority came out way better, and they matured, and they knew what they were doing, and it helped this country a tremendous amount.
Well, yeah, I'd be a big proponent of some kind of service. Everybody takes a year or two of service. Could be military, could be Peace Corps, whatever. I mean, because, now we even have started to normalize a period of time where you just do nothing or explore. And we call it skip year, We never heard of skip year. I mean, if I told my parents I was going to skip a year, oh no, you're not. That's not going to happen. But now we've normalized it. But it'd be really nice if it could be a year of service of some sort. I totally agree. Yes.
So do you think, part of the problem, or maybe the phenomenon, is with both parents working, you have the dual incomes, And parents so much want to give the kids what they didn't get.
Yes,
Right?
yes.
So, you know, we couldn't afford soccer camp, but now that we're both working, we can. And so it just seems some of it also is economically opportunistic, maybe, for these kids too.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I shake my head at looking at the presents at Christmas that filled the floor of our den. What in the world? I mean, I got 2 or 3 things or something when I was growing up, but we were overfull. You have enough income, you can do those kinds of things, but I don't know if we should be doing those kind of things, so. Was there another comment or question? Yes?
This is almost a different generation than you're talking about, but so the issues with, so I know families with 30-year-olds and 40-year-olds in the basement. So are those different issues by the time you get to those age groups?
I'm sorry, I didn't know the difference between the get to age groups.
So, yeah, so I know families where they still have 30-year-olds in the basement and 40-year-olds in the basement.
Yeah.
They haven't launched. So are those, by the time you're having kids that are that old, have the issues changed?
Yeah, so you're talking about these older people and young adults in the basement. And by the way,
Also young adults.
they're no longer young adults. By the way, I have a higher percentage of males that are problem launching than females. But, typically what happens with parents, the early 20s, it's, okay, well, they dropped out of school and tried a job, it's no big deal. So they're not too concerned, but when they get to be 27 and 28, the alarm bells are going off. They're still here, and they don't have a job. They don't have a career or whatever. And I don't know what the answer is, but, I do see these young adults, male and female, in their 30s and 40s that are still at home, and again, when I work with families, I say, my idea of launch, I explain launching is being more adult and responsible. So let's work with this person to step up, get a job, pay rent, help out in the family, do your laundry. I want them to be more adult-like. It doesn't mean kicking them out of the house. And some of them think, when I want to talk to them, okay, this guy's coming in here to get me kicked out of the house. But that's really not the case. It's about how to help them become more responsible adults, basically. So
That's all the time we have.
okay, thank you very much. I'll pick up some books and make those available to you. And thank you again.